And this is the Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. Mark. Glory to you, Lord Christ. On that day, when evening had come, Jesus said to the disciples, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. So we have a little exercise to do this morning, a little breath work. And again, although I'm prone to exaggeration, this is important work. The breath, as you know, is pretty cool. If you're doing it, you're alive. If you're not, you're not. And it's a good thing that you don't have to think about it in order to do it. Pretty much from the time that your little feet hit the planet, it's been pretty much taken care of itself. But, one of the things that's been happening recently, because we're, now more interested in things scientific than perhaps we once were, there's been a great deal of research done on the breath and the effect of breathing practice on the central nervous system. It's a big deal. And it turns out that science is verifying some of the wisdom that comes to us from 5,000 years before Jesus even hit the planet. And the same is true with the exercise that we're going to do this morning. The exercise really is called 4-7-8 breathing. 4-7-8, the number 4, the number 7, number 8 breathing. You can Google that and get instructions, not only instructions as to how to do it effectively, but the effect that it has on the central nervous system. It's very interesting. But the way to remember it is you breathe in for 4, in, and then hold it. It's important because you don't often consciously hold your breath, but you hold the breath for 7, and then you breathe out for 8. So just looking at it from a distance, 4-7-8, if you're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and breathe out for 8, you better bring a bunch in. Now you're going to want to bring the breath in through the nose. And in order to bring enough in through the nose for the count of 4, you have to make a little noise. You have to hear almost like, the sound coming in. So, get into it, get a good inhale. Now, holding the breath for 7 initially is going to feel weird because you don't do it that often. You don't hold your breath consciously that often. But it's not that hard, and you'll get into it. And you hold that for a count of 7. And then, you have to exhale for a count of 8, which is like a really long time compared to 4. So you have to let it go half as slow as you did when you brought it in. So you breathe in for 4, nice solid, inhale. Hold on to that for 7, and then kind of let it go for 8. And then do it again, and then again, and then again. And they call this a relaxation breath. They teach this to people who suffer from anxiety, worry. This is a tremendous antidote, for example, people who experience trauma, after trauma. It, kind of brings the heart rate down and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to call it calming the storm. Calming the storm. So, again, initially for the first couple of cycles, I'm going to count. In, 2, 3, 4, hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out. Like that. I'll count. And I'll do that for 2 cycles. And then you're on your own. I trust you. I know you can do it. 478, in, hold, out. Ready? Begin. In, 2, 3, 4, hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. In, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Very good. Now just return to your natural breathing and be conscious of whatever shift there may have been in your consciousness as a result of the practice? Is your mind quiet? Is your body relaxed? Are you more aware? What difference, if any, does the practice make? Good. Coming back into the room. Thought it would be irresponsible to ask you to calm the storm of your own life without giving you some how-to instruction. And again, I don't want to, overstate the case, but this work is really important. And the scientists suggest that 5 cycles of 478 begins to do the work that the practice can do. Anywhere from 5 to 10 is recommended twice a day. And you can take that with as many grains of salt as you wish. But that's coming right out of the pulmonary labs, as it were. So I don't know about you, but when I think of storm-tossed seas, I always think of John Newton and the experience of his conversion as a slave trader. When I think of wretched people, the most heinous people on the planet, really, evil incarnate, I think of people that traffic in human beings, and think especially of those in the 18th and 19th centuries that trafficked in Africans and brought them as slaves into European and American soil. It's a sin over which we have not yet gotten. So that's what he was. He was a slave trader. He was a dirtbag. He was in a word, he was a wretch. And so he's transporting slaves, and he's in the middle of the ocean. And although he had come from a very pious home, his mother was very devout, he himself had followed in the trade of his father and was active in it. So a storm kicks up. You've heard this story. If you haven't, I recommend it. There's some great YouTubes on the story behind the song Amazing Grace by people who have really studied the life of John Newton. And, he's in the middle of this raging storm, and he's coming out of the hold, his quarters or wherever they were in the ship, and he's on his way, up onto the deck, and there's a fellow right in front of him, and just as that fellow gets to the deck level, a wave comes across and sweeps him off the deck, and he's lost forever, never seen again. So that was the initial experience that John Newton had, emerging from the hold of the ship onto the deck. There goes his pal. Now, he takes the helm, he takes the actual rudder, and as many of you know, in the middle of a hurricane or a sea, what you want to do is point the ship, as I understand it, into the wind so that, the ship is kind of going like this and not like this on the side. So he's there, he's got this thing, and for whatever reason, he begins to scream, "Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy." And he does this for 11 hours. And the storm finally abates. He's still alive. And that's the kind of experience that would change your life. So 5 years later, he wrote the hymn Amazing Grace, trying to honor that experience that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, now I'm found. And of course, he went on to write a number of hymns and was in his time, a very popular and powerful preacher. But not only that, he came under the influence of, some of the greatest Bible teachers at the time, and certainly influenced the abolition of slavery because one of his best pals, and he was a mentor to William Wilberforce. And if you don't know the story behind William Wilberforce and his influence on the British Parliament, it's a story you've got to understand. So he became, an Anglican clergyman of great influence, John Newton. It all came out of that experience on the storm-tossed sea. So, this may be a story about meteorology over the Sea of Galilee, but, there are levels to this story that with the appropriate scuba gear, you can go down into it and get saved. You can get saved. Get saved. The storm-tossed sea. And we've talked about Mark before and about the gospel, the persecution of the Messianic Jews in Rome, soldiers knocking on doors. Are you a Christian? If so, you're bathed in blood and brought to the Circus Maximus. It was that clear. They were blamed by the emperor for the fire that burned Rome to the ground, and they were being sacrificed in the Circus Maximus on a regular basis all the time. As a Messianic Jew, they're beginning to wonder, wow, did we follow the right guy or what? Is this the Messiah or not? Because if I'm going to stake my life on this, I want to know with a degree of certainty if we're following the right one. And so they're asking that question, the identity of Jesus. And the people that are asking it in this particular story are the disciples. Now Jesus, the context is important. He's been teaching all day. He's been teaching all day in parables that for the most part, folks don't understand. Those are the ones that are mentioned in the story as being left behind. And then you have those that are getting it. They're getting it. They're close. They're the inner circle. Jesus has been explaining things to them, and now they want him to go with them. And he says, we're going to the other side. Now, this is one of the things that Jesus does that I don't care much for, and you don't either. Going to the places where you don't like to go. He's always making the disciples cross barriers. Let's go to the other side. Well, who's on the other side? The people that we don't like. The non-Jews. We're going to go over to Gentile territory. Oh, do we have to? Do we have to look at black people? Do we have to look at immigrants? Do we have to look at people that are different than us? Do we have to care about people whose traditions vary from ours? And what about these other boats that go along with him? Well, we're in those. We're tagging along. We're in for the ride. It sounds good so far. And no sooner do you make a decision that he's got something to say, that he's touched your heart with the love that only God can touch your heart with, that the storm kicks up. What is this? Well, this is the cosmic battle that Mark is trying to portray, that all of you are familiar with. This is the cosmic struggle of good and evil. There are God's purposes for your life. I love you. I want you to love one another. I want you to get along. I want you to enjoy my creation. And then there's everything that says, I want more. I want mine. I want power. I want authority. I want everything to go my way. And so this storm picks up. I don't have to tell you. I mean, we've just been through, we're in the pandemic. The whole planet is a storm-tossed sea. One of the most cryptic things that I listened to, and this was a while back, I heard a guy that sits on a board, a think tank or whatever, and the sole purpose of this group of people is to figure out what's happening with nuclear weapons everywhere. Where's the strontium? Where are the chemicals? Who's buying them? Who's using them? Who's manufacturing? How many? Blah, blah, blah. Let's count up this and this and this. And they're keeping a track of nuclear armaments on the planet. And this guy's being interviewed on NPR. And he said, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of things that could keep a person up at night. You could worry about the global economy. You could, and it would be worth losing sleep over. You could worry about what human beings are doing to the planet. You could worry about that. That could keep you up at night, and that would be a very legitimate concern. You could worry about war. You could worry about people hating each other. You could worry about politicians unable to really accomplish anything of any value whatsoever other than power, power, power. You could, and that would be worth worrying about. But here's something worth worrying about. This'll keep you up at night. Some idiot somewhere, sometime, is going to get their hand on a nuclear weapon, and that's going to be kaputski for everybody. Some idiot somewhere who doesn't care is going to push the button, and that'll be it. That's worth losing sleep over. So when you're talking about the planet and pandemics and all the kind of things that beset humanity, I mean, all these things are worth keeping you up at night. You could worry yourself literally. You could worry yourself sick, and many people do. Many do. And, Jesus' real concern, and, he's sacked out on a cushion. I love the detail. He's in the stern. He's in the back of the boat. He's not, and I remember the images that you always get from the story Bibles, the children's Bibles. Jesus decked out in absolutely white raiment, kind of standing over the boat with the storm with his hands up, like that, calming the storm. And it's good for children to have that image. But, he's in the back of the boat, asleep on a cushion. I mean, you talk about a non-anxious presence. Sleep on a cushion. And of course, I think, to me, one of the most rhetorical questions that's ever offered in the Bible is when they wake him up and say, "Don't you care?" We have that great scene of Martha and Mary, and Martha's doing all the work, or Mary, I think it's Martha's doing all the work, and Martha comes to Jesus and says, what's with Mary? Don't you care? I'm out here, I'm slaving away, my hands are burning on the fire and trying to feed all these people that smell really bad, and Mary's just sitting there like a bump on a log. Don't you care? And it's a very rhetorical question. Has there ever been a human being on the planet that cares more about people than Jesus? Was there ever a heart more compassionate? Someone who cared desperately about every single human being? Don't you care? And there's a great journey in this. There's a great journey in this. We're perishing. And we are perishing. Everyone's perishing all the time. Death, the doorway is just right there. No matter. Don't you care? And, he wakes up and says to the storm, "It's enough out of you." And the waters are dead calm. And, Mark is never really very poetic. They say that his Greek is, almost street Greek. It's just, he's not very polished. But this is poetry. Dead calm. It almost has a physiological effect, doesn't it? Dead calm. So just for a second, imagine in your mind, I know that you all have seen waters that have been turbulent. Maybe you've been somewhere where there was a hurricane or whatever. If not, you've seen it on the news, waves just, coming up, lashing into buildings and so forth. That's a storm-tossed sea. And then, what's it like when it's just, you could see yourself in it? The surface is like a mirror. That's a great meditation in and of itself. And then the conversation, why are you afraid? I remember when the pandemic first struck, and everybody was afraid. I was afraid. I wasn't as afraid for myself as I was for my wife. I found out just earlier this week. I got an email from a friend of mine that said it was a year ago today that Sandy underwent her surgery for cancer, and at that point I didn't know that there was going to be another anniversary. It could have been curtains. And that was a year ago. And, you're afraid. And you have every reason to be. And I was more afraid during the pandemic of Sandy catching something like that, because there would have been no doubt about what would have happened in her vulnerable state. And it was a scary time. And I was paying attention to all the spiritual teachers. I was linked into Richard Rohr and Jack Kornfield and these people that are always, talking about the spirituality and talking about fear and how to be in a circumstance that's so fraught with danger. And they all seem to say the same thing, that fear is a thing. It's a thing. It's a thought. It's a thought. And the best way to envision fear is like in a cartoon character when you see that little bubble with the arrow, and you know that they're not speaking, but they're thinking it. And all you have to do when you see that little bubble with that fear is pop it and let it go. And that is a very serious spiritual discipline, and you will not come by it just by thinking about it. You have to practice that over and over and over again. And that's why people who tell me, "Oh, I can't meditate, my mind just goes off with me," I said, yeah, that's what it does. And you're letting the tail wag the dog. Because if fear is making you sick and throwing you off course of your life and your love, then the tail is wagging the dog. And Jesus says, why are you afraid? And this is a very Buddhist question, because you need to ask yourself again and again, why am I afraid? What is fear? What is fear? Why am I afraid? Not, is your fear legitimate? Of course it's legitimate. The waves are coming in. You're about to die. You're afraid. Why? Why? What is fear? What is this that has the grip over me, that I almost have no control over, or so I think? And so we're invited into one of the most profound meditations on the planet for a human being. Fear. And the big journey that's described in all this story, and why it's so important, is because it maps out the journey from fear to faith. From fear to faith. There's a ton of spiritual journeys. I mean, I'm always fond of the journey from grief to gratitude. Somebody you love dies. You love them. You miss them. It hurts. It's terrible. But eventually, over time and on occasion, you'll come to a point where, I'm really glad that person was in my life. I'm just grateful. They're not here. I miss them. I cry all the time. But I'm grateful. I'm grateful that our paths crossed. I'm grateful that we loved each other as much as we did, that I was able to love them, that came from my heart the way that it did. It's a great journey from grief to gratitude. It's a great journey from resentment, when you hate somebody, to reconciliation and forgiveness. It's a great spiritual journey. I just can't say they've done that, all these good reasons to really harbor the hatred against them, but eventually, over time, and with love and grace and the Spirit, you forgive them. You find a way to live with love in your heart rather than resentment. It's a great spiritual journey. And so is the one from fear to faith. It's a spiritual journey. And so we're left in the end then, the sea is calm. The disciples are, they're just in an interesting place now. If they were scratching their heads before about who Jesus was, they're really scratching them now. Who is this? And as Christians, this is bedrock 101. You got to get this right. You got to get this right. Who is this? That even the wind and the sea obey. And, in the 4th chapter now of Mark's Gospel, we're just coming out of the starting blocks. And we know for sure, because of the first thing that he did, he cast out a demon. We know for sure that what he's going to do, and his whole purpose in coming here, is to roll up his sleeves and do battle and kick Satan right in the you-know-what. And that's what happens on that boat. And Jesus is going to win. And you may doubt it, but you don't have good reason to. I want to close with something that I came across in my sermon research. So I know that all of you have read John Bunyan. It's one of the great spiritual classics of all time, A Pilgrim's Progress. And this is one of the New Testament scholars reflecting on the final scene, one of the final scenes from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. A scene near the end of John Bunyan's spiritual classic and allegorical novel, The Pilgrim's Progress, finds the chief character, whose name is Christian, who is the archetype of any person struggling to lead a life of faith. He's coming to the end of his spiritual journey. The journey requires him to cross a great and fearsome body of water, a river. He is desperately afraid. Together with his friend, whose name is Hopeful, they wade into the water with trepidation. Bunyan has Christian now cry out, "I sink in deep waters. The billows go over my head. All the waves are coming over me." His companion, Hopeful, replies, with what may be among the most grace-filled words in all of literature. You think I'm prone to exaggeration. This guy's over the top. Be among the most grace-filled words in all of literature. Be of good cheer, my brother. I feel the bottom, and it is good.
Contributions to St. Luke's Episcopal Church help to make the digital ministry and other outreach within the community possible. If it is in your heart to make a donation, St. Luke's secure PayPal link, as well as the church's mailing information, may be found in the description of this video. Thank you.